Alright, let's do this. Coming in at number 10, we have more MKUltra. Sometimes the declassification of files reveals the wildest of conspiracy theories to be true. There was a rumor way back in the 1970s that the government was trying to find a way to control people's minds. The project involved human experimentation, and the United States citizens were unwittingly doped with LSD. They underwent hypnosis, sensory deprivation, isolation, and torture. John Greenwald, founder of disclosure site The Black Vault, obtained information on MKUltra via the trusty Freedom of Information Act in 2004. But many files are still missing, and many more were actually destroyed. Shockingly, CIA Director Richard Helms ordered all of the MKUltra files to be destroyed in 1973. In 2018, more than 4,000 new MKUltra documents were requested from the CIA after a successful crowdfunding campaign. It seems that the new records will be released shortly and will contain undisclosed information on the behavior modification efforts. Coming into number 9, we have the Silver Disc Over the Mountains. Sounds like a band name or a good album name. Further back, but clearly in the same sort of area topography speaking, I came across an image of a man taking a picture of a strange silver disc in the sky. The image is purportedly from Area 51, and it certainly looks like it could be. I'm aware that this image very much could be photoshopped, very easily photoshopped, but perhaps the story I have to tell you will inspire you to give it the benefit of the doubt. There is a road near Area 51 that has been renamed the Extraterrestrial Highway. It's a 100-mile stretch of State Route 375 near Rachel, Nevada. It was given its whimsical rebranding in 1996. Along this highway, countless people have reported seeing mysterious lights in the sky, especially during the 80s and 90s. Even today, night drivers are baffled by the so-called moving stars. Could it be a UFO similar to that allegedly in this picture? Maybe. But what might this be at number 8? We have what I can only describe as the metal wall. This image was posted in National Geographic and is a declassified image from Area 51. The footnote on the image reads, "Full-scale model assembly 1159. Now this leads me to believe that this image was taken in November 1959, but honestly, I don't know that for a fact. Although the image is in black and white, which does make me think it's an oldie. While it may be an oldie, it certainly does look futuristic. This could be an early stage development of a spy plane. In fact, I put my money on it. Coming into number 7, we have Beam. We are not ultralight beam. We are not ultralight beam. Honestly, sometimes I do stop to wonder if Kanye West is an alien. Like, he's pretty successful whilst also being a bit strange and aloof and otherworldly. I don't want to be the one to start an unsubstantiated rumor though. Anyway, before we stray too far into salacious speculation, have a look at this ultralight beam legit image taken at Area 51, and I want to know what's going on here, and is Kanye West behind it? This black and white image was published as part of a series of declassified images of Area 51 published in National Geographic. Again, context is king, but we simply don't have any. It's hard to tell if this image was taken outdoors. It's kind of blurry and distorted from the light. It could be taken outdoors, but also that could be a curtain backdrop. I just can't tell. If it is a curtain, then perhaps this was taken in a studio, in which case what Hollywood grade stuff is being filmed at Area 51. Some people think that the moon landing was staged there, and if this is a studio with a massive model UFO, then maybe. I think I simply need more information. Coming into number 6, we have the floaters. Doesn't sound great, does it? In April 2016, large, bizarre, and very much unidentified flying objects were spotted over Area 51. Allegedly, anyway. There are so many fakers and conspiracists out there that it's hard to know what to believe. 3 oblong objects were said to have been caught on film from a distance hovering over a hangar. The footage was uploaded to YouTube but has mysteriously been deleted. A still shot of the video, however, does remain. Why was the YouTube video deleted? Did we see too much? Maybe. The real question though is, what are these? Coming in at number 5, is that the Tardis I see? The Doctor is a Time Lord from the planet Gallifrey, and he is constantly time traveling. The Doctor is a Time Lord from the planet Gallifrey, and he's constantly traveling time and space and encountering other aliens, so it stands to reason that the extraterrestrial may end up at Area 51 at some point. It seems like his TARDIS may have been spotted there in recent years. Have a look at this. Some are hailing this image taken of Area 51 legit, and actually it is. It was taken on Google Earth. Some people think it looks like an alien tower, but others like me are straight up calling it a triangle TARDIS. You can find this image image yourself if you type this into Google Earth. On estimation, this structure is around 70 feet high and 30 feet wide, and I'm wondering if, Doctor, maybe you're there. Some of the Storm Area 51 memes have been claiming ownership of the Tardis as if it's found there, and to be honest, it has been rumoured that the centre is testing time travel, so maybe the Doctor has been captured there, or at least his spaceship. I've said it before and I'll say it again, I've always wanted to be a doctor's assistant, so if anyone's watching from casting at BBC, take me! Coming in at number 4, we have the pyramid. There are pretty nuts theories out there circulating that aliens built the pyramids. Why? Well, because it would be a feat of strength for humans even today, let alone humans of thousands of years ago. Allegedly, former Area 51 worker Bob Lazar claimed that the building contains evidence that aliens have influenced human culture for over 10,000 years, so maybe it's true. Triangles and pyramid shapes are also linked to New World Orders, and the Illuminati have also in turn been linked to extraterrestrials, so maybe there's something to it. Either way, feast your eyes on this.
Pyramid. This is from Google Earth. You can look it up yourself. You just look up the coordinates.
A Google Earth image of what looks like a pyramid inside Area 51, right here. Curiouser and curiouser. For those of you who want to look at this yourself, put these coordinates into Google Earth. Some people think that this is proof that Area 51 is harvesting alien technology. Other people think that the structure has a much more normal explanation. What do you think? Let me know. Some classic Area 51 conclusion stuff here at number 3, we have the Morgue. Of all of the pictures on this list, of this one I am perhaps the most skeptical, but it is a true classic. This is one of those proof of aliens for reals images circulated in the 1990s. It's kind of a lot like the alien autopsy video. This image was said to have been taken by a whistleblowing worker of Area 51 and leaked to the press. The only thing is that alien bodies like this are so easy to fake. In fact, even the alien in the alien autopsy video was a model, so these very well could be too. Creepy models that I wouldn't want anywhere near me. Still though, the image could have been staged and taken anywhere in the world, and honestly, it probably was. That being said, maybe it's legit. Maybe we're trained not to believe in things like this by the powers that be that don't want us to. Coming into number 2, we have the Silver Pod. YouTube channel Explore With Us ventured to the land surrounding Area 51 in June 2017. The channel shared exclusive footage with their 700,000 strong following, which claimed to show abandoned secret tunnels around Area 51, which looked something like this. Weird. To me that looks like an old sneaky cheeky secret rail tunnel, and I'm wondering what it was used for, like smuggling aliens in and out? Question? Later on in their adventure, the YouTubers also spotted this very odd sight hidden in the trees. Take a look. To me it looks like a silver ball on a triangular plinth. Also, it's in the hills surrounding a top secret facility. What does this really mean? Is it some kind of alien communication device, or watching device, or listening device? So many devices it could be. Okay, finally, do you want to see a very scary sight from Area 51? Check this out at number 1, and perhaps let it be a warning. We have the bikers.
Centimeters?
I knew you should. I know.
Listen, we're gonna give you guys a chance, okay? Get on your bikes, get the f out of here. We'll call Lincoln County, and they'll write you each a $750 ticket.
Okay.
Have you ever wondered what would happen if you just rolled up at Area 51 and tried to see them aliens? Perhaps a little precursor to the whole Storm Area 51 thing. I wouldn't recommend it for this very reason. Meet the bikers who were about to be met with bullets, but made a very lucky escape. Dramatic footage was uploaded to YouTube of a biker group who rode up to Area 51, kinda brazenly. As you can see from these images, they were met with quote-unquote camo dudes. The camo dudes come from nowhere in a white jeep and quickly jump out and point firearms at the intruders. The guards tell the guys to get the F out of there. The video from MacD Adventures has had over 7 million views, people love it. This isn't the only instance of this kind of response caught on camera either. YouTube channel Third Phase of the Moon uploaded this video featuring this hairy moment. So that's a response that people get when it's just a few of them swinging by Area 51. What if 3 million people did turn up and quote unquote storm it? I mean, if you're gonna have guns pointed at just a handful of people, what would the government do? Honestly, it's a question that I'm not sure we want answered.
Starting off this list in our number 10 spot, we have Rabbit Telepathy. This is a document that originally comes to us from 1975, but it was declassified in 2004. Located on the CIA website as a Department of Defense document, it detailed a variety of, quote, Soviet and Czechoslovakian parapsychology research that was done from the end of World War II through to the Cold War era. One of the most grisly and truly unbelievable experiments that were conducted that was listed on this document occurred in 1956. Basically, they were trying to use rabbits to communicate with submarines, which is definitely just bizarre on a regular level, but of course the way in which they conducted this experiment was wrong and inhumane and truly just very cruel. Just a little heads up, if you're sensitive to animal stuff, I would maybe just go ahead and skip over this point. So for the test, they would take a mother rabbit who had recently just had bunnies. They would keep the mother in a lab on shore, and then they would take the bunnies down with them into the submarine. Slowly, one by one, they would take the life of the bunnies, and each time they did, the mother rabbit's brain would produce a detectable and recordable reactioning. Is this one of the worst things I've ever heard? Yes. What's even worse is that the report then goes on to say that other examples of, quote, animal telepathy research continued into the 1970s, and that it included other animals such as dogs, bears, birds, insects, and fish. I can't imagine they were any different, but let's just hope that these other tests weren't quite so cruel and inhumane.
In our 9th spot, we have Trump's dirty laundry, and I don't mean like literally his stinky socks and undies. In May of 2020, Anonymous came after Trump during his presidency. This happened when Trump threatened to deploy his military force against the protesters. But Anonymous was like, nah, honey, you aren't doing that, and said they had dirt on him. They said that they would publish his dirty laundry. A couple of days later, they published 169 emails that mentioned Trump one way or another. Now, most of the emails weren't even bad, but it was just a scare tactic to show Trump, like, hey, we're not bluffing, okay? We got dirt on you. More on this in my next point. Coming in at number 8, we have Trump's connection to Jeffrey Epstein. So like I said, Anonymous leaked some emails about Trump. Well, they also threatened to release information connecting Trump to Jeffrey Epstein. Now, Trump and Epstein have been photographed together on a number of occasions. Apparently, they also have hung out with each other too. Some believe that Trump was a part of Epstein's ring and also exploited young females. And Anonymous apparently has proof, including access to Epstein's address book and old court documents. Technically, I'm cheating with this point since they didn't leak this information, but they did expose that they have this information. In our 7th spot, we have the Brazilian government. In June of 2020, Anonymous released personal information on the Brazilian president and his family and cabinet. This caused a lot of chaos. The federal police and the Brazilian Congress began to investigate. In the end, it was revealed that the federal government used $2 million of the public's money to fund advertising on several websites. Most of the websites supported the president, which makes sense as to why they wanted to put money into them. Not only that, but Anonymous leaked a number of government officials' addresses, income, and other personal information. The personal addresses were a very serious issue because it puts them at risk for attacks. Moving on, at number 6, we have CSIS documents. So what I didn't know is that apparently Anonymous has some beef with the Canadian government. One of their first attacks leaked secrets about the foreign activities of the Canadian Secret Intelligence Service, aka the CSIS. It released information about the size of their network, what information they have access to, along with other sensitive government documents. The Canadian government has only admitted to having foreign stations in Washington, London, and Paris. But according to the documents leaked, they have over 25 foreign stations. And I quote, many of which are located in developing countries and/or unstable environments. We're now at our 5th and halfway mark with the secret federal document. In another attack against Canada, Anonymous leaked top secret documents outlining the redevelopment of Canada's key diplomatic centers in Britain. including selling, relocating, and refurbishing Canada's diplomatic buildings in London. Now, it's nothing groundbreaking, but it's the fact that they got a hold of these top secret documents that's concerning. The documents were marked as confidence of the Queen's Privy Council, which basically means that it's top secret and private documents. Therefore, the government of Canada is looking into its own people to see if someone among them is leaking these documents to Anonymous, or maybe they're a part of Anonymous. In our fourth spot, we have the #OpsWakeUp21. In January of 2021, Anonymous attacked the government of Malaysia. They defaced 17 government and university websites. This was part of their campaign called #OpsWakeUp21. Basically, the purpose of this campaign was to highlight the poor security of the government's websites and to warn people about it. In a post, they said, and I quote, "Greetings, we are Anonymous Malaysia. This is message to Government Malaysia. Your security system is low. All data may be leaked. This can cause unwanted hackers selling all your information." Basically, they accused the government for keeping silent and covering up a number of data breaches that occurred over the years. The government knew that personal information of their citizens was being obtained and sold, and they just kinda covered it up until Anonymous exposed them. Coming in at number 3, we have Anonymous Malaysia Part 2. During the Anonymous Malaysia attack, they also revealed that Facebook was selling private information to government agencies. In a post, Anonymous said, and I quote, "If you're a hacktivist willing to, or a man who just wants to protect his freedom of information and join the cause, and kill Facebook for your own privacy. Facebook has sold information to government agencies and gave secret access to information security firms so they can spy on people from around the world. You can't hide from reality where you are. You're neither safe from any government. Someday you'll look back on this and realize what we've done here is right. You'll thank the internet government. We will not harm you, but we will save you." Okay guys, it is time to deactivate Facebook. Nice. Coming in at number 2, we have Epic. In September of 2021, Anonymous leaked data from Epic, which is basically a domain registrar and a web hosting company that has provided service to websites that publish neo-Nazi and extremist content. It's a pretty controversial platform, and Anonymous leaked details of every domain that was ever hosted or registered through them. It also leaked a number of personal information of their customers, like their purchase records, emails, invoices, and credit card information. Over 15 million email addresses were exposed. In fact, they released 3 rounds of data on their website. The first was in February of 2021, the second in September, and the third in October. In October, they actually leaked information on documents belonging to the Texas Republican Party. And in our number 1 spot today, we have the NSA. So thanks to Edward Snowden, we all know that the NSA was spying on Americans through their phone records. Well, Anonymous just exposed the existence of a secret NSA and FBI program called Prism. This program allows the NSA and FBI to take photos, videos, emails, and chats from the servers of 9 different internet companies, including Microsoft, Facebook, Google, and Apple. Anonymous leaked 13 huge documents about this program, and it revealed that the NSA is not only spying on Americans, but also citizens of over 35 different countries as well. Anonymous said, and I quote, "We bring this to you so that you know just how little rights you have. Your privacy and freedoms are slowly being taken away from you in closed doors meetings, in laws buried in bills, and by people who are supposed to be protecting you."
Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have Operation Paperclip. This operation began in 1946 when the President of the United States at the time, Harry Truman, authorized it. Basically, the entire point of it was to lure scientists from Nazi Germany over to the United States after the Second World War. This was done in an effort to aid the country in their post-war efforts, as well as to ensure that the valuable knowledge these people had would not end up in the hands of perhaps the Soviet Union or either side of the divided East and West Germany. Had it not been classified declassified information, at the time this would have been highly controversial, as many of these people were involved in, and sometimes even leaders of that hateful party. Former President Truman stood by his decision, saying that because of the relations with the Soviet Union, quote, "this had to be done and was done." Several of the scientists that were a part of this program were later investigated because of their former ties, but one was only ever tried out of the over 1,600. None of the Paperclip scientists were ever found guilty for any crimes, either in the United States or in Germany. Perhaps the most famous of all of the Paperclip scientists was Wernher von Braun, who really played a huge role in advancing NASA's Apollo missions. In our number 9 spot today, we have the Paradise Papers. After being taken from the offshore law firm Appleby and being leaked by a South German newspaper, these documents would reveal the nearly $10 trillion that were put into offshore investments, which were intended to hide the wealth and profit of many individuals, as well as to avoid taxes. Among those listed in the documents are Queen Elizabeth II, former US Secretary of Commerce Wilbur Ross, along with Facebook and Nike. This is just a few that are named on the 13.4 million confidential documents. There are many shocking revelations within these documents, including some that might allude to some other, even more shady dealings. Some of these documents were first released into the public domain on November 5th, 2017, and ever since then, more stories have been coming out as people continue to comb through the mass amount of documents. For some of those involved in the stories that have been released, there have been scandal, litigation, and loss of position for some of those named, as well as litigation against some of the journalists and the media who leaked the stories and published the papers. In our number 8 spot today, we have caller information. This is just one part of the many things that were leaked by Edward Snowden back in 2013. In that year, it was reported by The Guardian that, according to the documents that were leaked by him, the Obama administration has allowed the NSA to collect different caller information from Verizon. This was done through what was called a quote business records provision of the Patriot Act that was established under the presidency of George W. Bush. It allowed the government to order Verizon to hand over call information every day. This information included things like the time, location, and the duration of the call. The information began being collected under the Bush administration in 2001, and they were collected from AT&T, Verizon, and Bell South. Of course, once these documents were leaked and this information became public knowledge, US officials began trying to reassure the public that this surveillance was somehow necessary and was actually a program vital to national security, but many people felt like the spying was an unnecessary invasion of their privacy. In our number 7 spot today, we have the Pentagon Papers. In June of 1971, the New York Times published a few different excerpts that were taken from a top secret Department of Defense report that pertained to the United States and their involvement in the Vietnam War from 1945 to 1967. These papers were created as a part of a study by the Secretary of Defense, Robert McNamara, and the reason they were so important and secret is because they revealed that 4 consecutive presidential administrations had lied to and misled both Congress as well as the American people about the involvement in the war. Daniel Ellsberg, who is said to have been a military analyst who opposed the war, leaked these confidential government records, and him, as well as the New York Times and the Washington Post, all faced criminal charges in court for their efforts to get the papers into public knowledge, but in a turn of events, the charges were later dismissed. Not only were these papers important, but the leak was a crucial moment in time because it bred major distrust in the United States government that would only go on to grow. In our number 6 spot today, we have the Iraq war logs. This is a leak that came in 2010 and it appeared on WikiLeaks. If unfamiliar, this was a website created by Julian Assange in 2006 with the goal of quote analysis and publication of large datasets of censored or otherwise restricted official materials involving war, spying, and corruption. With a description like that, you know this leak was a big one. So, on this site, there were leaks of around 400,000 different US military documents that were now accessible to the public, and within these documents, the details of the Iraqi civilian deaths, the horrible treatment of war prisoners, and Iran's involvement in the war all came to light. At the time, this was the largest US military leak ever, and it was a huge deal. However, prior to this leak being made public, the information was not organized or analyzed, which had many journalists calling it irresponsible. These documents had people worried because they suggested evidence that there were crimes being ignored and that deaths were being covered up with numbers being edited. To this day, many officials have condemned this leak, saying that it put people's lives at risk. risk. In our number 5 spot today we have the Panama Papers. Remember that German paper from the Paradise Paper leaks? Well, turns out they are very involved in the leaking of documents, as they also have a hand in this one. The International Consortium of Investigative Journalists, along with this German paper, released 11.5 million documents that detailed different offshore tax havens. The papers were shared with the newspaper anonymously, so it's not exactly known who the source of the leak is, but the newspaper needed a year in order to decipher the encrypted files they were given before they could be released to the public. In 2016, the papers were published, which showed some of the private financial information of different celebrities, politicians, as well as business leaders from around the globe. A lot of the information in the papers might have been interesting and eye-opening, but the majority of it wasn't illegal, just maybe a little shady. There were, however, 2 arrests that were made due to this leak, and they were for wire fraud, tax evasion, and for forming a criminal organization, and some of those involved in the arrests lost their businesses because of it. In our number 4 spot today we have Prism. This is another one of the leaks that was made by Edward Snowden, and it involves a PowerPoint presentation, but this wasn't just my 6th grade PowerPoint on elephants, it was a presentation that involved the NSA. The slideshow was one that was used to help train intelligence personnel, and it detailed the United States and their involvement in a secret program called Prism. This program was the NSA's effort to collect a ton of data from internet companies. The data ranged from email content to search histories to file transfers. The reason this PowerPoint was so important is because it confirmed that the NSA had access to the servers of major US internet service providers like YouTube, Google, Skype, and Apple. Prism first began in 2007 with Microsoft and expanded to Apple in 2012. When leaked, Snowden warned that the extent of this data collection was a lot greater than the public even knew, and that it included what he called quote dangerous and quote criminal activities. This leak also coincided with a meeting between the Chinese President Xi Jinping and former US President Obama. The meeting was already heated as it was in relation to cyber spying between the 2 countries. The meeting was focused on the United States and their accusations against China, but after the leak, the US had little credibility left in the meeting. China was adamant that they too had been a subject of this data collection, and the EU countries were later brought into the mix, with European citizens beginning to fear that they were also being targeted. In our number 3 spot today we have the Pandora Papers. One of the most recent leaks on this list today took place in October of 2021, and again involves the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists. Last year they had published the first leaks of what would end up being 12 million documents, which detailed the dealings of some of the world's wealthiest individuals, including political leaders. The papers revealed their secret offshore accounts that were being used in order to evade taxes, and the consortium has called their investigation into this the quote most expansive leak of tax haven files in history. In order for this to come to fruition, they needed the involvement of more than 600 journalists in 117 different countries, which of course makes it clear that many people had a hand in exposing the truth. This leak is said to have made public all the ways in which politics, business, and real estate are impacted by corruption. The leak went on to have quite an influence over the election in the Czech Republic, and it also left more people calling for the government to crack down on things like money laundering and tax evasion and all the other many sneaky ways people have found to hide their wealth. In our number 2 spot today we have Operation Mincemeat. This one is different from most of the others on this list today, and that is because it was a planned leak that proved that not all leaks are truthful. This leak from the Allied forces during World War II, or really the operation itself, was basically to plant this fake top secret information on a body that just washed up on a beach on the coast of Spain. Basically, this information was intended to lead the into thinking that the Allies were going to invade Greece and Sardinia when the real plan was Italy. British intelligence officers knew they had work to do, and it involved inventing an entire fictional life for the body that was being planted on the beach. There was fake correspondence, and they even went as far as to have a photograph with a fake fiancé. When many people's lives are at risk, cutting corners is not the right idea. In the end, the plan fooled both Spanish authorities as well as German leaders in 1943, who sent all all of their troops to Greece. While they did this, the Allied forces invaded Sicily. As the Axis powers began to lose in the Battle of Sicily, the Italian dictator Mussolini was dismissed as the prime minister and subsequently imprisoned. This remains one of the most interesting information leaks in history. In our number 1 spot today, we have Watergate. This is perhaps one of the largest scandals and leaks in history, especially in the history of the United States. In the middle of 1972, there were 5 men who were arrested for breaking into and subsequently trying to bug the Democratic National Committee headquarters at the Watergate Hotel complex in Washington, D.C. As the year went on, the 1972 presidential election came closer, and there was an anonymous source who went by the name, quote, Deep Throat. Sorry, I can't change history, that's just the name. So, this anonymous source fed information to Washington Post reporters Carl Bernstein and Bob Woodward that, quote, the Watergate bugging incident stemmed from a massive campaign of political spying and sabotage conducted on behalf of President Nixon's re-election and directed by officials of the White House. Despite this information leak and it being reported in the news, Nixon was still re-elected, but he was also under some serious investigation. There was a series of Senate hearings, and the Senate even went on to create a special investigative committee. The hearings were broadcast nationwide, and they had witnesses testifying that Nixon had approved plans to cover up administration involvement in the break-in, and that there was a voice-activated taping system in the Oval Office. These hearings captured the attention of Americans everywhere for weeks, and in the end, the United States Supreme Court ruled that Nixon had to release these Oval Office tapes to government investigators, which then went on to reveal that he had not only attempted to cover up what went on, but he also later tried to use federal officials to deflect the investigation. Under the threat of an imminent impeachment, Nixon had no choice but to admit his guilt and resign, making him the only president to do so. His successor, Gerald Ford, ended up pardoning him, so he escaped prosecution, but there were 69 other people indicted, with 48 of them later being convicted. Remember that Deep Throat guy who spilled the information in the first place? Well, his identity remained a secret for 33 years until 2005, when former FBI agent Mark Felt revealed himself as the source. This is probably the biggest political scandal in US history, and it revealed corruption beyond what Americans at the time could believe. It truly changed the way people would look at government leaders forever.
Alright, coming in at number 10, we have the blast-off chair. This is officially a declassified black and white image of a secret Air Force project taking place in the desert lands surrounding Area 51. In this image, we can see the United States Air Force running a very exciting test indeed. We see a car and an aerodynamic looking vehicle together, and then a whopping great chair that seems to have blasted off with a person in it. Maybe it's a dummy. Up and away. The plane-like vehicle says Test 24 on it and has a camera monitoring it. We don't know exactly what's happening here. I think context, I imagine, would be key, but we don't have any. If you think that mountain range looks familiar, here it is again at number 9. Coming in at number 9, we have PPD-29. Catchy. In 2015, Obama released his new hostage policy, which was called President Policy Directive Number 30. Now, the last publicly announced derivative was PPD-28, which led people to realize that 29 must have been passed under the radar. PPD-29 is clearly a secret national security order. This literally is a secret, so I have no idea what to tell you other than it exists, and in 6 years' time its declassification will be up for discussion. We may find out sooner if the law ever needs to be executed publicly, although as it's in the national security interests, we probably don't want to find out until it's declassified. Coming into number 8, we have swine flu. Okay, hands up if you actually contracted swine flu. Me, but I wasn't living in the United States, so maybe this doesn't apply, but still, it sucked, although I've never been as skinny as after I recovered. Swings and roundabouts. So it's been 10 years since the outbreak of swine flu, which caused a global pandemic, but actually it turned out to not be as bad as everyone thought it would be, thank goodness. Nonetheless, 10 years means that documents regarding the government's knowledge on the epidemic are soon to be declassified. It seems from a Forbes article that something shady may have been going on with the government and swine flu. The article suggests that not only were sick pigs not being monitored, but also that the government-funded Center for Disease Control were very protective of their data. They were not fulfilling the public health mission by sharing their findings. Coming into number 7, we have quote-unquote sicko jokes. In September 2018, it was revealed that the Cold War era jokes had been discovered among millions of declassified documents regarding Soviet Russia. The CIA's deputy director in the 1980s received a document entitled Sicko Jokes. It was a file of jokes told amongst Soviets themselves about their own leaders. One corker from the era was, "A worker stands in line at a liquor store. They say, 'I've had enough. Save my place. I'm going to shoot Gorbachev.' 2 hours later, he returns to reclaim his place in line. His friend asks, 'Did you get him?' To which they reply, 'No, the line there was even longer than the line here.' Troll-a-lol-a-lol, some classic 1989/90 humor. Sure, Gorbachev of course was the last leader of the Soviet Union and at the helm amid its collapse. My point being that if the CIA had a list of jokes about the Soviet Union, they absolutely have documents containing loads of jokes for all political leaders, and honestly, I kinda wanna hear them. Building on from that, Soviet secrets are coming into number 6. In the name of access to information, which is something democracies are supposed to champion, the CIA is obliged to declassify documents. Sure, one way they get around this is by releasing a whole load at the same time and hoping that the juicy information, the shady information, goes unnoticed in the sea of data. This may or may not have been their thought process when they released millions, actually millions, of Soviet-era files in 2017. It's already been revealed that the CIA recruited mind readers to spy on Soviets, with the job title Remote Viewers in something called Project Stargate. What do the other 12 million files have to reveal? I'll have to wait and see, but I don't know, Project Stargate sounded pretty exciting. Okay, I swear this is the last I will mention Russia in this list, but now seems like a good time to mention Donald Trump's Russia release at number 5. In late 2018, Donald Trump ordered the release of classified documents regarding the Russian interference with the 2016 election. The White House announced that the press had asked the Justice Department and the Director of the National Intelligence to publish secret material. On September 6, 2018, he tweeted, "Maybe declassification to find additional corruption." He was seeming to suggest that there was some kind of deep state working to undermine him. This statement came a year after it was revealed in declassified documents that Russia did actually interfere with the election. By the end of September 2018, Trump had backed down somewhat on the document release and asked a justice watchdog to review the Russian docs. Coming into number 4, we have weapons of mass destruction. It has been 18 years since the War on Terror began and 16 years since the onset of the Iraq War, when the United States decided to invade the Middle Eastern country. Some documents have already been declassified. The rest may come at the 25-year mark in 2026 and 2028, so not long now. In 2015, the CIA seemingly declassified the documents justifying the war, 2 years after President Obama declared the war over. The document was from 13 years prior and was supposed to be a justification for the war, but in actuality it revealed that the US were lacking, and I quote, "specific information on many key aspects of Iraqi President Saddam Hussein's weapons of mass destruction." Basically, the declassified documents show that it was all a little bit of a ruse. The declassified document led to Congress concluding that the Bush administration had overstated the Iraqi threat. I wonder what else we will learn about these so-called weapons of mass destruction from the documents when they're declassified. Coming into number 3, we have the JFK assassination. John F. Kennedy Jr. was assassinated over 50 years ago, and there are still a lot of questions surrounding his murder. The official line is that the perpetrator was Lee Harvey Oswald, but there are a number of conspiracies that suggest that this isn't the full story. There has been a slow release of classified files on the November 1963 assassination of JFK, but of course, thousands remain a secret. Donald Trump released further Kennedy files to the public, but the full story is of course yet to come. Not all of the documents were released, some were very much held back, so the full story on one of the most high-profile deaths of all time is yet to be told. Coming into number 2, we have Guantanamo. Guantanamo Bay was set up by the George Bush administration in 2002. It is a United States prison camp filled mainly with suspected terrorists. Rumors of detainee torture and imprisonment without trial were very much just rumors, until the CIA were forced to declassify a number of reports on the controversial prison. I'll read an excerpt from a Guantanamo Bay document I found in the FBI declassified vault. On a couple of occasions, I entered an interview room to find find a detainee chained hand and foot in the fetal position to the floor with no chair, food or water. Most times they had urinated or defecated themselves and had been left there for 18 to 24 hours or more. On one occasion the air conditioning had been purposefully turned up so far that the temperature was so cold. The detainee was barefoot and shaking from the cold. On another occasion the AC had been turned off completely, making the temperature in the unventilated room well over 100 degrees. The detainee was almost unconscious on the floor with a pile of hair next to him. He'd literally been pulling it out throughout the night. The report also mentions the sound torture that had been rumoured. The information was supposed to be declassified in 2031, but during the Obama administration there was a data dump of declassified Guantanamo documents. Again though, there are still thousands of files waiting to be released which will further reveal the extent of government torture and more. Finally, coming into number 1, we have 9/11. It has been 18 years since 9/11, so does that mean in 6 years time we're gonna find out exactly what happened? Will we read classified government documents that detail exactly how the planes hit and what it took to melt steel beams? Will we find out more about the alleged pipeline through Afghanistan? Was there advanced knowledge of an attack? Did the government ignore warnings? My guess is we're gonna need to wait longer than the usual 25 years for these answers, as likely the classified documents are still pretty sensitive. Some answers are coming though. Many documents have already been declassified. The Obama administration famously declassified the final 28 pages of the December 2002 report. This was conducted by the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence and the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence. Honestly, I think in my lifetime we will have more answers. I really hope so.
Yeah. Starting off this countdown, we have the Blue Leaks. In June of 2020, following the killing of George Floyd and the protests, Anonymous leaked hundreds of gigabytes of law enforcement files. It has been named the Blue Leaks. Over 269 gigabytes of data were taken from over 200 law enforcement agencies. This included emails, audio recordings, videos, and documents. In total, there were millions of files leaked. Some of the leaked documents show that the FBI was monitoring the social media accounts of protesters, and they were also alerting local law enforcement about anti-police messages. Other documents showed that the FBI was tracking Bitcoin donations to protest groups, as well as highlighted some scandals and police misconduct.
In our number 9 spot today we have the Gateway Process. This document was originally published in 1983 and was declassified 20 years later, and it was prepared by Wayne M. McDonnell at the request of the commanding officer in the US Army Intelligence and Security Command. Basically, McDonnell was tasked with assessing the Gateway Experience, which is a meditation training that was meant to instruct people on how to harness their electromagnetic energy waves, and it trained them how to direct their own brain waves and use them to detach from time and space. You can in fact still find and buy this program should you wish to. The analysis or assessment by Wayne tackles a wide variety of subjects, all the way from astral projection to quantum physics and so much more, but at the end you're pretty much left with the fact that, quote, there is a sound, rational basis in terms of physical science parameters for considering Gateway to be plausible in terms of its essential objectives. But are you ready for the unsettling part? He also warns that those using the techniques for, quote, terrestrial information gathering trips or other operations of the like should be, quote, intellectually prepared to react to pulsable encounters with intelligent, non-corporeal energy forms when time-space boundaries are exceeded. That's enough for me to tap out without even trying it. In our number 8 spot today we have the cattle crimes. Okay, so these documents reveal a super grim FBI investigation that took place in the 1970s at the request of US Senators Floyd Haskell of Colorado and Carl Curtis of Nebraska. I guess there was some weird sort of connection between these horrific things being done to cattle across as many as 21 states. In a letter from 1975, Senator Haskell was able to identify 130 of these strange, macabre cases in Colorado alone. All of the cases were eerily similar, which is unsettling considering the details. In most cases, the cattle would have had their left ear, left eye, rectum, and reproductive organs all missing, and all the blood was drained from the carcass, but there was no blood on the ground or around them, nor were there any footprints. How absolutely horrifying is that? Some people chose to believe that the cause for these was mysterious helicopters and UFOs, but there's a letter from Senator Curtis to the FBI director that says, quote, "The series of incidents stretching from Oklahoma to Nebraska in which cattle have been dismembered in some kind of strange witchcraft cult." I'm not gonna lie, I don't think it was UFOs or witches that did it. It wasn't until 1979 that the FBI was granted jurisdiction to begin investigating these weird happenings, and when they did, they determined that most of the instances were a result of, quote, "normal predator and scavenger activity." And while that answer sounds a little fishy at best, the documents went forward to reveal that not all of the instances could be accounted for. Also, this idea of it being a completely normal scenario also contradicts reports that say the techniques used in these horrible instances were, quote, "very professional and sometimes even referred to as being conducted with surgical precision." I'm sorry, but a wolf or a coyote or a bear or whatever predator you want to say did this, ripping apart its meal isn't exactly a surgically precise operation. No arrests were ever made, and while it was deemed solved, a ton of mystery still surrounds these stories to this day. In our number 7 spot today, we have Acoustic Kitty. Apparently in 1967, the CIA was spending millions of dollars trying to make cats into spies. I don't know why they chose the one animal that does not care what you want it to do, but alas, they did, and Project Acoustic Kitty was born. The project basically involved implanting electronic spy equipment into real living cats, who would then be trained to basically eavesdrop on unsuspecting people. This is another one of those Cold War era plans that was intended to be used on those in the Soviet Union. The project had a whole slew of issues, of course, however, because cats get hungry and distracted, and unfortunately the first time this plan was being tested, there was a catastrophic outcome. The cat got hit by a taxi, but the project of course was cancelled, and the researchers said that they believed they could train cats to move short distances, but that, quote, "the environmental and security factors in using this technique in a real foreign situation force us to conclude that for our intelligence purposes, it would not be practical." In our number 6 spot today, we have The Judgment Call. If you haven't heard of the name Stanislav Petrov before, maybe just take a second to whisper a quiet thank you to him, because he truly might have saved all of our lives with one moment of calm, cool decision making. In declassified records released in 1998, it became known that back in 1983, when Stanislav was a Soviet Union soldier, he opted not to fire nuclear missiles, despite the fact that it appeared that the United States had launched 5 missiles directly at his home country. He used his own personal judgment to assess and figured that it was a false alarm, and he was right. Having to make a call like that would be tough. The stakes are so high, but he honestly, in that one single moment, might have prevented a third and likely nuclear world war. I'm definitely glad that those documents became declassified so that the world could learn of this story. It kind of revives my faith in humanity just a little. Maybe not everyone just reacts without thinking. In our number 5 spot today, we have Operation Unthinkable. The title of this video says Unspeakable, but the title of this operation says Unthinkable, and honestly, both are kinda true. Declassified in 1998, the documents pertaining to this operation have to do with what could have been a completely different ending to the Second World War. The documents describe Russia as a, quote, "threat to Western civilization," and they also outline the possibility of a, quote, "total war against the USSR in the wake of World War II, and they state that the goal of the mission would be to, quote, "impose upon Russia the will of the United States and British Empire." The document also revealed plans to utilize the newly defeated German military, as the document says that the Allied forces, quote, "can count upon the use of German manpower and what remains of German industrial capacity." According to the documents, if followed through, this plan would lead to the elimination of Russia through either occupation of the metropolitan areas, or in even darker turns, until the Allied forces made such a decisive defeat of the Russian forces in the field as to render it impossible for the USSR to continue. In the end, the operation was deemed too hazardous, and it was decided that in order to win, it would take quite a long time and it simply wasn't worth the risk, so the idea was scrapped. In our number 4 spot today we have the phone call. Not so much of a document and rather a phone call, but when the telephone calls of former President Lyndon B. Johnson were revealed, it also showed something darker. The calls showed that then presidential candidate Richard Nixon might have negotiated behind the back of the president with South Vietnam. South Vietnam apparently ended up pulling out of the Paris peace talks after being told that Nixon would get them a better deal once elected. You might be wondering why he did this, and apparently that is because Nixon was concerned that an earlier ending to the war would end up derailing his election campaign, since the war was one of the most pressing campaign issues. In the end, Nixon did end up winning the election by less than 1% of the popular vote. For many years this was speculated and rumors were swirling, but once the phone calls were released, it seemed to confirm what many believed for years. In our number 3 spot today we have Starfish Prime. This is an operation that took place in 1962 with the documents discussing the outcomes being declassified in 1989, and the operation was a joint one between the US Atomic Energy Commission and the Defense Atomic Support Agency. Basically, they detonated a thermonuclear device in the sky above the Pacific Ocean. They launched it from the Johnson Atoll using the Thor rocket, and once at an altitude of about 240 miles, they set it off, which ended up producing a yield of about 1.4 megatons. The documents showed that the electromagnetic pulse was so powerful and widespread that it disabled not only most of the equipment that was set up to measure it, but it also took out streetlights and caused telephone outages in Hawaii nearly 900 miles away. The electrons released caused an aurora that could be seen over most of the Pacific Ocean, and according to the documents, the quote visible phenomena due to the burst were widespread and quite intense, and apparently it was visible for days. In the end, it is said that the researchers weren't expecting such a powerful blast of electromagnetic pulse, and they also were not anticipating that the electrons from the blast would get stuck in the Earth's own magnetic field for months, possibly even years, but alas, they did. This went on to create a radiation belt around the planet that eventually went on to disable at least 6 satellites. So, that's great. In our number 2 spot today we have The Warning. On Tuesday, January 28, 1986, the Space Shuttle Challenger launched on live TV, but just 73 seconds into its flight, it disastrously disintegrated, taking the lives of all 7 people on board, which included high school teacher Krista McAuliffe, who was going to be the first non-military civilian in space due to the Teacher in Space program. Of course, investigations were immediately launched to figure out how this could have happened and what exactly went wrong. In fact, the president at the time, Ronald Reagan, appointed a special commission to investigate the causes, and as it turned out, the investigation report revealed that the disaster was, quote, an accident rooted in history. This basically confirmed that NASA had previously known about the problems that led to the destruction of the Challenger and the subsequent demise of the crew. The least surprised of all was perhaps engineer Robert Boisjoli, who apparently sent an inter-office memo months prior to the tragedy warning of the exact fate the Challenger would meet should they continue to choose to launch the shuttle in such cold weather. Quote, the result would be catastrophic of the highest order, he wrote. Quote, loss of human life. In our number 1 spot today we have Operation LAC. Operation LAC, which is short for Large Area Coverage, was a Cold War era project that involved the US Army Chemical Corps. Basically, it was a test that was designed to see whether or not it could be possible or feasible to taint a large area by dropping chemical agents from planes. To test this idea, they dropped, quote, a myriad of microscopic particles from planes, covering an area that is said to span from the Rockies to the Atlantic, from Canada to the Gulf of Mexico, so yeah, definitely a large area. In fact, it was so large that this is actually the largest test that the Chemical Corps had ever undertaken. According to the declassified documents relating to this operation, the test, quote, did not provide the Corps with nearly as much data as the Corps would like, and then it goes on to say that, quote, to obtain additional data the Corps planned further tests for the next fiscal year. Okay, that's a little daunting. While not necessarily the same operation, also in the Cold War era was a similar test conducted that targeted a neighborhood in St. Louis, Missouri. This test saw the area being sprayed with zinc cadmium sulfide. At the time, those local to the area were being told that, quote, the government was testing a smoke screen that could shield St. Louis from the aerial observation in case the Russians attacked. But of course, decades later, documents revealed that the tests were actually a part of a biological weapons program. And to make matters even worse, the zinc cadmium sulfide was linked to an increase in cancer among the residents of the neighborhood. In our our number 10 spot, we have the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. This leaked secret got leaked all the way back in 1848 by a reporter named John Nugent. John published in the New York Herald an unsigned copy of this treaty, which would conclude the Mexican-American War. He published the entire thing, which included the negotiations for peace before they were settled or agreed upon. The United States Senate tried as hard as they could to get John to reveal his source, even going as far as to basically place him on a sort of house arrest, but he wouldn't crack. Investigations continued on for long after the leak, and it is widely believed that at the time, the Secretary of State James Buchanan, who would go on to become president a decade later, was the source of the leak, but this has never been proven. This was a very early demonstration and establishment of what goes on behind the scenes with politicians and the media. In our number 9 spot today, we have the investigation. In 1967, while in the midst of the Six-Day War, which was between Israel and neighboring states, an Israeli aircraft attacked the USS Liberty, which was a ship that was gathering information for the US NSA. In this attack, 34 Americans were killed and 171 were injured. Many people, of course, were outraged and figured that this attack was intentional. Many people believed that the Israeli government meant to follow through with this attack so that they could prevent the quote spy ship from intercepting sensitive information about upcoming battles. In the end, declassified documents from both the US and Israeli government agencies showed a very different story. It turns out that the attack was in fact not deliberate, and that pilots had thought that the USS Liberty was an enemy ship, which was why the attack was launched. The declassified reports show the actual position they had when the incident went down. And our number 8 spot today, we have Project Horizon. Even before people were going to space, we had big goals in mind for the world of space travel. In 1959, there were plans for a proposed manned military base that would be located, of course, on the moon. This plan, which was dubbed Project Horizon, would quote develop and protect potential United States interest on the moon, as said in now declassified documents. It was estimated at the time to cost about $6 billion, and the projected operational date was December of 1966, which is when they thought they could have 12 soldiers on the base by. The project was not only wanted to study more about the surface of the moon, but what better of a place to spy on the Earth than the moon? This project, of course, never came to fruition, and the reason it stopped progressing was because the president at the time, Dwight Eisenhower, rejected it at the same time that the responsibility for America's space program was being transferred over to NASA. In our number 7 spot today, we have consideration. Presidential duties certainly are not easy, and making big important decisions is likely a very nerve-wracking experience that you'd probably want as much information as possible for. That is exactly why, around the time of the Cuban Missile Crisis, Joint Chiefs of Staff Chairman Maxwell Taylor wrote a memo at the request of the then President John F. Kennedy. The memo was requested because Kennedy wanted to know what the human cost would be of invading Cuba. The declassified memo explained that should the Cuban forces use conventional weapons and not tactical nukes, that quote, our medical plans are drawn up to accommodate up to 18,500 casualties in the first 10 days of the operation. He then goes on to explain that if these tactical nuclear weapons were in fact used, that quote, there is no experience factor upon which to base an estimate of casualties. The number they could estimate is already more than terrible enough. I truly do not even want to hear the next one. In our number 6 spot today, we have Project Minaret. This is a document that became declassified in 2013 as a part of the National Security Archives efforts. This historical document describes a sort of watch list of prominent Americans who were critical of the Vietnam War. The document explains that their overseas communications were tapped and listened into by the government from 1967 to 1973, and a quote from the document reads, quote, President Johnson wanted to know if the domestic anti-war movement was receiving help from abroad. The project expanded so much that it went on to include more than 1,600 people, including civil rights leaders like Martin Luther King Jr., Whitney Young, and Muhammad Ali. There were also other people like Democratic U.S. Senator Frank Church of Idaho, Republican Senator Howard Baker of Tennessee, New York Times columnist Tom Wicker, and Washington Post humor columnist Art Buchwald. The surveillance began under President Johnson, but it continued on through to the Nixon administration. In the end, the only reason it was stopped was because Attorney General Elliot Richardson was concerned about its very doubtful and murky legality and decided during the Watergate scandal that it would be best to shut it down. In our number 5 spot today, we have Operation Operation Gladio. This was a plan that was developed during the Cold War by the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Basically, the plan was designed to keep Europe as safe as possible if there were to be a Soviet invasion, and to do so, the plan was to form these kinds of secret armies in many NATO countries like Italy, Belgium, and France. These armies would be preparing for a potential takeover, and they would then lead the resistance if this were to occur. Some of the preparations for this plan, should it have to go forward, were things like spying as well as hoarding ammunition, which is a frightening thought. This project was so secret that not only was the Soviet Union obviously kept out of the loop, but some of the highest ranking officials in the countries involved didn't even know about these little secret armies. In our number 4 spot today, we have a double agent. Oleg Pinkovsky was a Soviet military intelligence officer who had a high rank, but he was actually working for the United States and Great Britain during the Cold War. Sort of like a double agent sort of thing. He is best known for the role he played during the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962, where he gave the US government some information that turned out to be extremely valuable that pertained to the capabilities of the Soviet missiles that had been installed in Cuba. In the end, Oleg was found out by the other Soviet intelligence officers, charged with treason, and executed in 1963, which is a terrible ending to that story. But what if I told you that some declassified documents just might have revealed a different side of this story? There are apparently some people who believe, because of these documents, that Oleg was just a decoy who may have actually relayed false information to the US about the Soviet arms capabilities. The intelligence he gave them just may be proof that his loyalty was with the Soviet Union the entire time. In our number 3 spot today, we have the aircraft. In 1988, a US warship in the Persian Gulf ended up shooting down an aircraft. Unfortunately, this turned out to be a civilian craft that was on its way to Dubai, and in the end, there were no survivors. According to declassified documents, Navy personnel incorrectly identified the plane as an Iranian fighter jet before launching the missile that took the flight down. In 1996, the United States reached a settlement with Iran where they paid $61.8 million to compensate the families of the victims, but it is said that there has never been an apology issued. In now declassified official investigation documents, it is said that they could not find any fault with the naval officers who brought down the flight. Others have suggested that this is untrue, as journalists pointed to discrepancies between the official report and the later accounts of what occurred. Like, allegedly it was originally said that the flight deviated from its standard route, but this is said to have been found to be false. The report also apparently says that the warship was operating in international waters at the time, when it was really operating in Iranian territorial waters. In our number 2 spot today, we have the lie. Thanks to a document from the National Security Agency that was declassified, many people received a confirmation of what they long believed. This is the idea that one of the 2 supposed North Vietnamese attacks on US ships in the Gulf of Tonkin in 1964, the attack that the president at the time, Lyndon Johnson, and his administration used to justify the massive escalation of the Vietnam War, yeah, apparently it didn't happen at all. The historical analysis conducted and declassified by the NSA revealed this all. In the article, it is noted that intelligence and defense officials who knew about the faked attack, or rather who doubted the evidence brought forward by the administration, didn't speak up because of a, quote, awareness that President Johnson would brook no uncertainty that could undermine his position. It's a terrifying reality, especially when we look at the war and what went on to happen from there. In our number 1 spot today, we have New Techniques. This is a project that was originally released in 2004, but it was heavily redacted by the Bush administration, and then was released again with a little less deletions by the Obama administration, and basically it describes what is called, quote, enhanced interrogation techniques that were used on certain detainees that were part of a terror group. These techniques include things like something called walling, which includes pulling the prisoners forward and then pushing them back into the wall, stress positions, sleep deprivation, waterboarding, and sometimes even isolation and sensory deprivation for hours on end, sometimes with a, quote, harmless insect placed inside of the box with them, which is intended to increase the discomfort. All in all, there's still a lot in these documents that hasn't been fully revealed to the public, but I think we've all seen enough movies to understand.